All right, everybody, welcome to As It Is Written. My name is Ryan, and today we are going to be watching a special video from Tim Pool. This is on his Timcast show that is you can find on YouTube at Timcast. Thank you for joining me. Unfortunately, last night I was trying to stream, but I had major internet problems. I could not get my computer to get onto the network. So unfortunately, I couldn't stream last night, so I'm going to do this today as kind of a makeup. So without any further delay, we're going to get right on into this interesting video about abortion.
Back to a little bit of this, but I want to jump to this political story here. We have a tweet from Eric Swalwell, and this might be one of the funniest bits I've ever seen. This makes
great.
Saturday Night Live look like, you know, amateur improv hour at a local college comedy club. MAGA Republicans want women arrested for having an abortion. This is what that looks like. All right, let's play the video. It's got 2.5 million views as of 24 hours ago. I hope you guys are ready to enjoy this. Oh wait, I gotta fix the audio. I always do that because before the show we switch the output.
Yeah.
All right, there it is. There it is.
You're weird. He is weird, but cute. Gross.
Mary Anderson,
Yes.
I have a warrant for your arrest.
Arrest for what?
Penal Code 243 violation. Unlawful termination of a pregnancy.
You gotta be kidding me.
That is my personal business.
That's for the courts to decide, ma'am. Your medical records have been subpoenaed, and Dr. Landry's already in custody.
No, my God, you can't just.
You will have to submit to a physical examination.
What? Why you?
No one's touching me. I want
They pull their guns out.
Ma'am, turn around! Put your hands behind your back, now!
Why is this happening? Love you, honey bear.
The acting, wow.
We're just enforcing the law here.
I would just like to say that the entire premise is absurd. If she had actually committed an abortion, she would have known that was illegal before the cops show up. They're not going to come by and retroactively start arresting people for abortions that they committed years ago before it was illegal. In our justice system, that's called ex post facto. You cannot charge someone with a crime that they committed before it was a crime. And so the whole premise is just absurd. That's not how they would do it at all, and they're going to talk about that in the video.
Elections have consequences. Vote Democrat on November 8th. Stop Republicans from criminalizing abortion everywhere.
Oh, there's more.
Protect women's rights and freedom.
Please don't do this.
Eric Swalwell. You know what I love? Like in the beginning, when he's doing like near the baby's mouth, and then the wife is like, he's cute, and the kid's like, she's gross. I was thinking like, the reason why they can't get the acting right on what a family looks like is because these people don't have families.
Yeah.
So they're just like, I think this is what it looks like. I also want to point out that the first reply you can see is from Adrienne Curry. Shout out. People cannot afford food, gas, or even their own homes, and this is your strategy? LOL. No, seriously, like the production value is so bad. Yo, the cops, if they ever did show, would be like, man, we have a warrant for your arrests. Come with me. They wouldn't be like, you're going to get a medical exam. We've arrested your doctor. They wouldn't say any of those things. They'd say you have a right to remain silent. Anything you say or do can be used against you in a court of law. Please place your hands behind your back. And that would be it. And everyone would, the husband would be like, oh, what's going on? And then she'd get arrested. That's about it.
Would you be arresting people? I mean,
Yeah.
So I look at it like, okay, there's a little baby right there, eating, and what if they decided they were going to kill that little baby? Then wouldn't it be justified?
Well, that's her personal business.
Well, yeah.
And that's the point. The baby that is outside of the womb is not materially different from the baby that is inside of the womb. There should be no legal difference between those two children. A child before they are born has every single bit of information that they will ever have inside of their DNA and will grow without interference into a healthy and happy adult human being. And so to say that we should murder that child because it committed no crimes is insane.
Yeah, I guess that between them two, right? Like, but that to me, that's how I view it. And, the more I look into abortion and the more I look into really what it is murdering babies. That's what it is. And so, it should be enforced.
Do you think from
By the way, it is a 9/11 every single day. If you count the number of babies that are aborted in this country, it's about 3,000. It's absolutely sick. We are killing the same number of people that died in 9/11 every single day. And instead of, them being adults that have already lived half their lives, we are talking about children that have been outside of the womb never. We are talking about children who have not even had the ability to enjoy the life that God has given them. And it is an absolute crime, and a heinous one at that, to murder that child.
From the point of conception, at any point, abortion should be made illegal, penalty prison?
I believe that life begins at conception. I believe that is the correct point in which you would determine it a life, and then that the state's job is to protect it.
Should the mother go to prison as well as the doctor, like in this video from Eric Swalwell?
It's a sad, unfortunate thing, and it's going to be very difficult to try to get society to switch their minds on this, that it's not okay to kill a baby. And it's going to be hard. I think we've got to be somewhat, I hate saying this, but there's a transition that you have to go through. But it is not okay to kill babies. I mean, if you the contrast of this, I guess, because this really isn't that great a production, but just go and watch. I mean, it's terrible to watch, but just go watch a video of an abortion.
I know what you need to do. You need to make your own version of this, but the mom has a mustache, she's twirling, I'm going to kill this baby. And then the husband's like, yes.
And that's how we should view it. That is what's happening. It is the most evil, vile, despicable decision that anyone could ever make, to go to an abortion clinic and murder their child. I'm sorry. Even if you were getting talked into it, that's like saying that I got talked into murdering my toddler. You can't a mother can't get talked into murdering their toddler, but they've been told that this isn't a human being and it's just a clump of cells, so they can kill it. What if they told your toddler's just a clump of cells? That's all your toddler is. That's all you are. You're just a clump of cells. So why can't we kill you? And that's the problem with abortion. And that's the problem with defining life as starting at any other moment than at conception. At conception, a human being has every single bit of genetic information they will ever have, unless there is some kind of a medical problem and some kind of a mutation. So unless there's a medical problem or a medical emergency, that child is the same being it will be its entire life. And so it is a human being, it is a child, and it should be loved and cared for by its mother the way that God intended inside of her womb. And to do anything other than that, unless there's a medical reason to do it to save that child's life, is an absolute abomination and horribly horrendous. And we need to treat every single person involved in that as such. We need to treat Planned Parenthood as a murder factory, the same way we would treat Auschwitz. We need to treat the abortion doctors the same way we would treat the Nazis. And unfortunately, the mothers are equally as culpable as the doctors. They decided to be there, and they gave their consent to the doctor performing that operation. And so they're equally as liable.
But no, I mean, if that's the case, a lot of conservatives say they would never go as far as arresting the mother for this. It's the provider who kills the baby who would be punished, not the mother. But you're saying you think the mother is involved.
Well, I mean, if justice was to be served, it's those who had the intent to kill.
Mm-hmm. What about exceptions? Do you think there should be exceptions?
So I think conception should be termed, because there is where you have where the baby gets, or gets in the I'm trying to get in the fallopian tube, and that
ectopic pregnancies.
Yeah, there you go. That's the term. And that will kill a mother.
But I think those are considered non-viable as it is, and so those aren't. At least for a long time, that wasn't considered an abortion.
And then
So Tim is 100% right. An ectopic pregnancy is not an abortion in the same sense that an abortion is. So technically, the term abortion means to remove a dead child from the mother's womb. That is the definition of an abortion. And so by that definition, yes, an ectopic pregnancy would be an abortion. The difference is, and this is what the laws should say if they're writing new pro-life laws, the laws should say that it is illegal to murder a child inside of the mother's womb, and that life begins at conception. That's how the laws should be structured. And so an ectopic pregnancy is not murdering a child. The child is already dead if there is an ectopic pregnancy, and you should absolutely remove that body from the mother. Unfortunately, the child died, and that's a horrible tragedy, and nobody's happy with that. But that already is easily dealt with in the law. There is no one that committed a crime in a miscarriage either, and so I think that gets brought up as well. And it's just a heinous slander and slur to say that a miscarriage would be classified in any way, shape, or form the same way as a murder. If a toddler dies of SIDS, sudden infant death syndrome, we don't arrest the mother and the father for killing their child. Okay, it's just something that happens. It's horrible. That's the fallen world that we live in. That's because of the sin that we committed, but that is not any one person's fault. And to even use that as an argument is despicable and evil and vile.
In vitro is another thing, like, because they're actually taking the sperm and the egg out, and they're fertilizing it, if you will, and then they're putting it, and so some people are like, well, that's conceptionist too. So I think that it needs to be determined, or as part of the definition must be that it's in the womb.
There's challenges here, because I understand.
This is the one thing that I disagree with him on. I don't believe that it should be just in the womb. I think that any time that an egg is fertilized, that being that is created is a human life. It has the exact same DNA outside of the womb that it would have inside of the womb. And I think that we should do everything that we can to have that child be raised and grown the way that God intended.
I understand what you're saying, and I lean more on the traditional pro-choice side. The issue I take with it, I also view as a libertarian perspective, in that there are circumstances, there's challenges here, I'll admit, so let me walk through this. There are circumstances where if a woman does have a legitimate risk or problem with the pregnancy, how do you get through that effectively? Does the state have to get involved and issue a permit to allow it to happen? I mean, these.
Yes, this is slightly a bit of an issue, but the fact is we've already had conjoined twins for as long as human beings have been around, and these issues get solved. All right, and there, the doctors get to make decisions on who to save and who not to save when there's life-threatening situations. And so if there are 2 hospital beds and 1 doctor, the doctor, what they do, I think they call it triage. They come up with a game plan as to find out which one is doing worse and which one needs the attention more immediately, and they go and they deal with that person. Or they, they also use a few other variables. Which one has the higher likelihood of living? All those sorts of things get factored into how we save human beings, and so those sorts of decisions will not be criminalized. Okay, the only decisions that will be criminalized would be to kill the child in order to do something else. That might be criminalized, but how we go after and how we decide which of the two to help and to save is not an issue.
Things can become overwhelmingly complicated, and then what is an actual health matter for the mother is now an issue of the state and certification or permitting and stuff like that. I have an issue with that.
Well,
I do understand, though, just to walk through this. I think abortion is wrong. I think too many women today are using it as contraception. I think the mainstream left, the modern left, is pro-abortion. And that makes there's no middle ground for how we actually deal with an extremely complicated, and let's be real, there is no middle ground. I mean, you either are going to create a circumstance where women will get elective abortions as birth control, even though we think it's wrong, or you'll penalize the woman or arrest the doctor or the woman.
So and that's why, I intend on declaring life begins at conception, and making that the point, because ultimately it's a determination of when life begins, because then you have to say, well, then it's not okay to take the life, right? I mean, if life begins at this point, then it's not okay to take the life. Is it, we all agree that after the baby is born, it's not okay to take their life, right? Well, I don't believe that's when life begins. I believe that it begins at conception. And so therefore the state's job is to protect that life. And ultimately, when it comes down to like a court proceeding or a trial or a prosecution, it comes down to intent.
What about in the case of rape?
So I'll admit to you that I did at one time believe that should be an exception. But I do not believe that there is a right way to take a life.
I hear what you're saying. I understand the moral position. The challenge I have in this circumstance, let me pause first because people get heated on this one. Well, let me just say,
we'll get through this.
We'll get through it.
We'll get through it.
A woman who, through no fault of her own, is raped and forced into carrying a baby. She was completely responsible in every right and was victimized. I don't see how the state can determine that you have to provide your body to another living person. Now, I do understand it is extremely rare that this is the case in terms of abortion. This is the problem I have. 92% of abortion is elective or no reason given, just contraception, contraceptive abortions.
Non-medical.
That to me is insane. But the issue I run into is the government being like, now I know you were victimized, but we, the state, have determined your body and blood now must be shared with another person.
So this is,
and this isn't a perfect argument, and I won't stake my whole reputation on it, but my where I lean right now is to say that just like the draft, so as a man at 18, I have to go register my body and the location at which I reside with the federal government in the off chance that at some point they need to call me up, take away every single one of my rights and privileges as a United States citizen and tell me to go die. That is what the government has the right to do if you're a man. And so I would suggest that unfortunately this is one of those places where the woman's corresponding duty is to carry that child. Unfortunately, it is another human being that must be treated as such. And so for the next however long, I would suggest that there should be options to allow them to remove the child as soon as it can be taken care of by doctors. I know that's not what's best for the child, but I can understand that as long as the child lives. That's the main point. And so unfortunately for that time period, I would just say that we consider the woman to be drafted. If we want to pay her like she's in war and give her money and health care and everything else, great. I completely agree to all of that. But if you can say that the government can take my body and force me to go shoot at a Chinese person that I don't want to kill, then the government can say that this child must be protected and maintained. And unfortunately, the only place to do that is this woman's body.
This is the reality of it, though. The reality of it is those who get an abortion suffer more emotionally and many other ways because they got an abortion.
I just want to state that this is an absolutely terrible argument. 100% terrible. Shouldn't even be said. I think it completely defeats the entire point of everything else that we've said. It has nothing to do with how the women turn out afterwards. That's your decision. You can make decisions that will lead to you having emotional stress and problems later. You have every right to do that. And so to use this as an argument that it's better that the woman carries a child, I think is absolutely terrible. I think it's horrible to think that we have any right to make a decision for a woman based on how she's going to be 5 years from now. That would be an absurd reason why we would say that she needs to carry her child.
Versus those who actually keep the baby. They may give it up for adoption, whatever, but they are, they are healed more by going through that pregnancy and having that baby. It's difficult.
Yeah, but that's not a legal or moral argument. I mean, that I can't understand. I can't understand that argument. I mean, if there's a woman who says the government will not force me to carry my rapist's child, like, you might think she'd be better off. But if she's saying if she's going to kill herself,
again,
I know they're rare.
It's the right of that child to live. That's where it becomes it's difficult, right? Because
And that's where I agree with him. It is the right of the child to live.
talking about a life here,
That's
and
why
we're
there's, like,
saying that
there's no middle.
just because of the circumstance that you were, if you were created, if you will, now because of that circumstance, we're going to take your life, and that I don't agree with that. I think that the better way is to side with life. That's where I end up.
Seamus Coughlin of Freedom Tunes made the point. I believe this was the point you made, Seamus. So if I'm wrong, forgive me. But he said the detriment to the female in this scenario is less than the detriment to taking the life.
Yeah.
So his point was
That is much closer to a correct, reasonable legal argument that of the two scenarios, the person that would be less intruded upon would be the mother, who is only suffering for at most 9 or 10 months, where the baby would be suffering a permanent death, and that would be much more unreasonable to sentence someone to death or to sentence someone to carrying a child for 9 months.
basically,
Much better.
yeah, you know what? This woman might now have to suffer for another 9 months, but suffering for 9 months is not nearly as bad as terminating the life of another being. I still run into this. I don't like government, and I don't like that idea. But I certainly understand.
Believe me, I'm right there with you, and
It's tough, huh?
But man, when you watch, which is terrible, I've never been able to watch a video to the end with it when it comes to abortion. I can't.
Well, this is
And so then that's what changed my mind. That's what changed my mind.
If a woman has a miscarriage, do you think there should be an investigation?
No, that's a natural thing that happens.
But what if she jumps on the ground and kills the baby and then calls it a miscarriage?
If there was intent, that's what all crimes are based upon, intent. Like if you intentionally tried to kill the baby, then the state would probably have some jurisdiction there. But
So how would they know unless they investigate?
Yeah, but it's just like any other crime. How do you know unless you investigate? I mean,
and they often just don't investigate.
We're not.
I would like to, and I don't know the answer to this, but I would suggest that it would be no more and no less of an investigation than what happens when there is a baby that dies from SIDS. Okay? So there are already instances where babies die under mysterious circumstances. It's called sudden infant death syndrome. And do we have police showing up at women's doors and hounding them and harassing them about their dead baby? No, we don't. And so this whole, again, it's another one of those completely unreasonable questions that people who are pro-abortion throw at us anti-abortion people, and it's completely absurd. It is absurd to believe that there would be any difference between how we deal with a child dying mysteriously now and a miscarriage. In fact, it's going to be even less, because we know that miscarriages are very likely up until a certain point. Now, could there be an investigation after a certain point when miscarriages are very, very, very unlikely and the mother shows up and it's got a bunch of bruises on her belly? That might be a little bit different scenario. There might be an investigation there. And if a child dies in the crib and the mother claims it's SIDS, but the child's got a bunch of, bruising around its neck, there's going to be an investigation there as well. And the fundamental fact is that this is a child, and whether it's in a cradle or a womb, it should be treated the same.
We're not talking about
precedent.
We're not talking about creating an entire system with all these exceptions and everything. We're talking about, we already have murder laws. We already have these laws, and they're based upon intent. And basically saying that life begins at conception. And so the state's duty is to protect that life.
Well, not all life. You kill mosquitoes, but you're talking about humans or people. Persons, and the argument is living tissue isn't necessarily a person. So like a sperm isn't a person, an egg isn't a person, a sperm egg combo isn't necessarily a person until
that's when it becomes a person, Ian. A sperm egg combo is called I believe it's a zygote, and that turns into a fetus, which is just a baby. It's just, all these are just other terms for developmental stages of human beings. If it was a dog, you'd say that it was a dog if it was in its mother's dog womb.
In my opinion, till it's thinking and has feelings and emotions and has a sense of self. Other than that,
and the problem with Ian's definition is all of those things can be taken away. So I could go brain dead and I would have absolutely none of those things that he's talking about, but my body could still be alive. And in a year, a miracle of science, they could figure out how to solve the problem that I have, and I could come back and be exactly the same way that I was. And to say that you need to be conscious and to have feelings and all these other things, it's just nonsense. It is religious, spiritual nonsense. Okay? Let's call it what it is. It's not science. There's no science saying that when a child is conscious, that makes them a human being. There couldn't possibly be science. That's a philosophy. And so the only science that we have is we have half of a human being in the sperm, we have half of a human being's DNA in the egg, and when they combine, you have a full human being. And the funny thing is that actually, at the moment of conception inside the mother's womb, there is a spark, there is a flash of light that we have been able to videotape or video record. And so we actually know the very exact moment when a human being comes into existence. And it's absolutely absurd to say that there needs to be any preconditions on a human being with the right number of chromosomes to be a human being, calling them anything else until they reach some sort of arbitrary developmental stage is absolutely absurd. And I will keep saying that. It's absurd. It's absurd to put any time frame on human beings' development and call them a human being at a certain point other than conception. It's absolutely absurd. It is anti-scientific. You're denying the science. And just like they want to claim that I am, they actually are denying science.
It's just like growing tissue.
Yeah, but with that, I agree. That's the argument of like when life begins, right? But I mean, I have 6 children, and a newborn, is not very aware of themselves.
Not when life begins. Life begins. Sperm is alive. Eggs are alive. It's always living stuff. But whether
sperm and eggs are not alive. So part of the definition of life is that it can grow and reproduce. A sperm and an egg can neither grow nor by themselves reproduce. And so the sperm and the egg themselves are not alive. They are half of a human being, and therefore they do not have to be treated with the dignity the human being deserves.
whether or not it's a person, whether or not it's murder depends on if it's a person. Because if you kill a cow, you're not murdering it.
Well, conception is where, the sperm and the egg come together and they begin to grow as one, if you will. And I believe that that's when life begins. As far as I get, but I don't want to get into semantics.
Yeah, well,
I think life begins. It's always living. Your sperm is living. But it's not about killing life. I don't think that's the
argument.
I just want
to say, personally, I'm pro-life, but I'm extremely skeptical of giving police officers more reasons to arrest people. How would you handle it as a governor? What would be a punishment? Like, what would you do to a woman?
I am also very much opposed to giving police officers arbitrary reasons to stop someone, to search someone and harass someone. But unfortunately, this would not be an arbitrary reason. If you are against murder, you should be against abortion. They are the same thing. So if you want to say that, well, petty crimes and stuff shouldn't be reasons that the police have to harass you, great, we can have that conversation. But we can't have a conversation about abortion and murder being not a reason for a police officer to question you.
Well, we already have murder laws.
Right.
So that's life. That's a life sentence.
No, not always.
Predominantly.
Depending on the...
It used to be that was a death penalty, and it should be the death penalty, but that's a completely different topic.
Severity of the charge, the degree. There's third degree. I think there's even fourth degree in some states.
Right. And the laws, the laws are there for as a deterrent, right? I mean, that's really what they're there for. They're a deterrent, and so this would be a deterrent for people. The
problem is if you don't enforce laws, no one takes them seriously, and it wouldn't just be a deterrent if you're enforcing.
Well, I think there's actually a much simpler breakdown of what happens. The end result is abortion clinics just cease to exist. The overall, the amount of abortions that happen will drop to a ridiculously low amount. They'll still happen. The state probably won't be arresting and prosecuting doctors because they'll be done in secret. And there's a lot of problems with that the left brings up. But in reality, As much as the left wants to create the scenario where like the police show up and they're like, your doctor's been arrested, that probably will never happen. Extremely rare. Something that people need to understand is that people can go online and admit to committing serious crimes and post the evidence, and the government still doesn't go after them. The reality to this life, to this country, is that they do not want you in jail. First of all, we all know what's going on with the woke left in these big cities, releasing people like crazy. Yeah. But there's overcrowding. The courts don't want to deal with it. Look, I once got arrested for skateboarding, and the judge was pissed. I show up for court, and he puts his glasses on, he looks at it, and he's like, what? He's like, come on, my docket's full already, and you get out of my courtroom. So what really happens with these laws is my prediction on if they actually did criminalize abortion nationwide as like a murder charge, Planned Parenthood clinics would just cease to exist, and it would not be that big of an issue.
But you'd see miscarriages spike.
Well, we might, and that might be an issue that we need to look into and how we can solve that problem. But I don't think we would see as big of a spike in miscarriages as you might think. If a woman is told that that child is her baby and it's alive and is exactly what she knows it to be, I think it's very unlikely that most women would want to kill their babies. Right now, I don't think there's a huge rash of women that are murdering their children. The difference here is that we have told them it's a clump of cells. The men around them can claim, and the men that are responsible for it can claim that it's a clump of cells and it's not really alive yet, and they can force them and browbeat them into going and getting an abortion. And I think that happens in the vast majority of them. Or they believe that it's an inconvenience on their life and they can just go get it taken care of, but it's not a baby anyway. I think those are probably the two most likely scenarios for women who get abortions. And I think both of those are solved by telling them, look, the state now believes that that it is a baby, it has been conceived, and is now growing inside of you, and you have the legal obligation to take it to term, whatever that means. And I think women would be willing to do that. I don't think women want to kill babies. I really don't think we have a nation of women who think of themselves as baby murderers. And if we told them that by killing their child, they're now a baby murderer, I think a lot of them wouldn't.
I don't think so. I really don't think so.
Oh yeah.
I think
babies keep dying,
man. The
That's
whole
the
culture's going to
nature.
shift. Everyone's going to stop having sex like it's not a big deal. It's going to be a very, very different thing from the ground up. And
Just make one law and that'll change
right.
entire.
I think people will realize
culture
you
will
can't
change.
do that.
It will have a massive
joking, by the
impact.
way.
I mean, look at there are questions about when what can make culture shift. For one, the entirety of this country just all of a sudden decided that the marijuana laws didn't matter, and people were just going about breaking the law and making movies about how funny it was. So I'm not convinced outright the culture would change, but Planned Parenthood and abortion clinics would cease to exist overnight if there was a nationwide ban.
Yeah.
We would see an immediate uptick and increase in spousal abuse and in boyfriends abusing their girlfriends. I do believe we would see that, and we should absolutely enhance the punishments for those crimes, especially if it's in regards to a child. If a woman is being threatened, abused, and beat up in order to try to get her to believe that she needs to murder the child, or that the husband punches and murders the child himself, he should be treated as an abortionist. I hope that was clear. Basically, what I'm saying is that I do think that there will be an increase in husbands and boyfriends and men in general abusing women who are carrying their children. That's an absolutely heinous crime that should be treated as such. It should be treated as an attempted murder if they're abusing a woman who's pregnant, because that might lead to the death of the child. And I think we should absolutely increase the punishments for those crimes at the same time that we equate abortion to murder. I think those things should happen at the same time, because I do think that would be a problem that we do need to correct for and to solve for.
And of course, many of the left and pro-choice, they freak out about that idea. That's a reality. There will still be it's not going to be back alleys with coat hangers. It's going to be private underground facilities.
It'll be chemicals. They'll mail
Probably,
stuff.
yep.
The people will
That's right.
send stuff in the mail, little pills. You take it. There's no trace of it. There's going to be a huge spike in miscarriages.
No, there's
people,
not.
Are they just going to pretend like they're not doing secret abortions when they're having miscarriages?
Ian, what you misunderstand is
come on.
A spike in miscarriages requires the women to report the miscarriages are happening.
Yeah.
So if you
unreported stuff.
So if you mean women so miscarriages won't spike because women will be inducing abortion and not telling anybody. So abortions will go down. Some abortions will remain. Miscarriages won't because women are not going to report their illegal abortions.
But how is that stopping the ethics of killing the baby? That doesn't change things.
One is the state's not paying for it. And two is there is a law there in place. It's a moral thing as
stops
well.
elective abortion. I mean,
exactly.
it stops the overwhelming majority of elective abortions.
Murder will still happen. Outlawing murder won't stop it. Why are we outlawing murder? We shouldn't outlaw murder. It's the dumbest argument I've ever heard in my life.
I mean, a lot of that stuff is safer than taking pills and killing the
Okay,
kid
but hold
in
on.
utero.
Look. You're getting me to argue for him now.
It's way safer for the murderer to be able to do it legally and for you not to be able to resist. We should have laws saying that you can't resist murder.
You don't think abortions would, or the miscarriages would spike? Is like, I mean, think outside the box on this one.
Let me walk you through this again. A woman who has who induces an abortion illegally would not report it, right?
I don't know. I don't know how that works.
So she would go to the cops and be like, I broke the law, arrest me?
Well, is it known that she's pregnant? Do her neighbors know? They're like, she was pregnant a week ago.
How would they know if she's
whisper? If you're, and then the government's like, we'll pay.
You're making up scenarios.
Also, guys, it's important to note here: Dave Portnoy is going to be really pissed if this goes through. And then number two, he's like, what? A lot of people will go to Canada and to Mexico, like already a lot of Mexicans, like a lot of Americans are already going for their health care as well.
Okay.
So that's another.
And we should make that illegal. If you go to another country to murder your child, if the child's a toddler, that would be illegal. So it should be illegal as a child that's inside the womb. Okay, as a baby inside the womb, it should be illegal for you to go anywhere and to murder that child. That's pretty simple.
Component.
So the interesting thing is on the other side of this, I want to completely deregulate the medical industry.
Interesting.
And but why is abortion different? Because it's life. And if there was one thing that the state is supposed to do, it is supposed to protect life.
Amen.
And so I lean very heavily on the libertarian side. Absolutely.
So
This
but
is
not with abortion.
I think there's an argument Ben Shapiro has made as well that if you're libertarian and you believe in very limited government, there is one thing that most people believe government should do, and it's protect life.
That's right.
But then it's the war machine. Like, it's the killer. Government's main job is to protect life, but it's also to kill.
And this is where Ian doesn't understand how the world works. And unfortunately, part of the government's job in protecting life is to kill life that is threatening that which it must protect. Okay? So the United States government's job is to keep the Chinese from invading our country and taking over. That is them protecting me and my right to life, liberty, and property. Okay? That's part of what they do to protect life, is they kill other things that are trying to come in and murder me. That's their job. And so that's the same thing with the police. It's the police's job to protect law-abiding citizens from people who are trying to abuse them or murder them. And so to say that that means that the government has a license to kill or has the job to kill, technically, yes, they have the ability to, but they're not doing it willy-nilly. Their job is to do it to protect me. And if we want to say that that's not what the government's been doing, especially with wars in Afghanistan and Iraq and other places that I guess technically Afghanistan you could say attacked us, but Iraq never attacked us. If you want to say that going into Iraq was a problem, great. I completely agree. We should look into that. But it is the government's job to fight off other people who are trying to hurt me. That's their job.
And to make murder legal so that they can kill.
No, that's not something libertarians agree with. My point is making is that
the government's function.
Libertarians are like, the government should protect life, not be actively taking it. And most libertarians, I think, overwhelming majority, are anti-war and don't want the U.S. involved in the killing in military-industrial complex.
I'm raising my hand for that. I mean, absolutely.
Yeah. So, like, if the government's going to protect the life of a baby by destroying the life of a mother, I just don't see the protection racket.
Hold on. We got to stop right there. The point that I brought up, that I reiterated for Seamus, is the mother will live and the baby will live, or the baby dies and the mother will live. You see the issue?
You're talking about like no abortion versus abortion?
Right. In an abortion, someone dies, someone lives. With no abortion, the mother suffers for an extended period, assuming the mother is suffering, and then the baby is born, but both live. That's the moral argument that Seamus made to me. I'm not saying I agree with this stuff.
I think the idea that more life is better is kind of erroneous too, because its quality of life is super important.
Quality of life is not important. Okay, let's just start there. Quality of life is not important. The fact that someone lives in what we would imagine to be abject squalor does not mean that they don't have a right to live. Does an ant not have a right? I guess an ant doesn't have the right to live. Does a human being not have a right to live because they're in a mud hut? No, of course not. They have equal amounts of they have an equal right to live as I do. Okay? Just because someone's poor and living in a situation that you wouldn't want to live in doesn't mean they don't have a right to live and to strive to live in a situation that you would want to live in. So, if we look at 100 years ago, there wasn't anybody living with the standard of living that I have. There wasn't anybody that was in a room that was as clean as this room is right now. Okay? Every single room in the world was dirtier. Almost by definition. And so to say that there is some kind of a quality of life that you must have in order to justify your existence is one of the most evil and maniacal concepts you could possibly come up with. And that's what's led to the genocide of millions and millions of babies, is the idea that they shouldn't be born because they're going to be poor. That's absurd. Okay? Everyone was poor. No one knew where their meals were going to come from 300 years ago. There might be a famine, and you might starve for a month. Okay? Those were the conditions that human beings lived in the not-so-distant past. And we might live in again in the not-so-distant future. We are living in an absolutely, absurdly amazing time. The problems and the issues that we have that we are dealing with are so minuscule compared to what it was that human beings dealt with 200, 300, 400, 1,000 years ago. Okay, we have modern medicine, we have running water, we have electricity, we have computers, we have information. I mean, everything that we have today means that our life is better. But does that mean that I get to go kill somebody in Africa because they're living in abject poverty? That's absurd and evil.
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah, but you don't take life just because you're not going to have good quality. That's not justification to take.
I'll just shout out Seamus again. He made a cartoon where there's a poor kid sitting on his bed and he's like malnourished and everything's grainy and gross. And Democrat man shows up, and then he's like, "Help, Democrat man! I'm hungry and poor." And he goes, "I'll save you," and then disappears and then reappears instantly. And then he goes, "What did you do?" And he goes, "I went back 12 years to convince your mother to get an abortion." And then the kid goes, "What? No!" And then just disappears. Like, it's an interesting point Seamus makes when look, we hear a lot of really stupid arguments from the left as to why abortion should be allowed. Like, kids are poor. And I'm like, I'm pretty sure if you go to a poor kid and say you should be dead, they're going to be like, no, thank you.
Yeah.
And what you're really arguing is not that person would go back in time 12 years, but that person would take a gun, point it at their head, and put a bullet in their brain. That is what you're saying that they have a right to do because they're poor and because this kid's living in abject poverty. You're telling the mother that they have the right to go murder them. What's the difference? What is the difference between that day and 12 years before? There isn't. There is zero difference except the location of that child. And unfortunately, we believe that because of the location of the child, the mother has the right to kill him today. And that's evil and wrong and morally reprehensible.
But I think there are real challenges here, and mine mainly stems from the government mandating someone's body be shared with another person, because I don't see a moral way to resolve that. I understand the point Seamus made that I brought up several times. So without running in circles again, let's jump to the next story, because this is not something we can solve.
Good conversation.
Yeah, but it's good, and it is really difficult. But let's jump to this story because it's the...
And that's where we're going to end it for today. So thank you for joining me. Sorry that I couldn't get a normal stream out, but I hope that this suffices, and I hope that you have a wonderful day. And goodbye. Have a great day.